Hey guys, what's up? Shah here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Stormwind Horrific Vision on a full clear on my Elemental Shaman. So last week we looked at Orgrimmar, and I got a lot of good feedback from that, so I also wanted to bring you guys this side as well. Stormwind is definitely notably harder. There were some nerfs to it with some of the damages, but there's a lot of effects that do a lot more like sanity draining, and those are things you need to be aware of. So I'm going to break down how exactly I did this. I used all orbs and my proc cheat death. But outside of that, it was a fairly good run, so I want to break this down for you guys. So very, very similar, if not identical build that I was running in the Orgrimmar. I'm running 2 Natural Harmony, 3 Igneous Potential, Ancestral Resonance, along with Essence of the Focusing Iris as my major essence, Vision, Conflict, and Breath of the Dying as my minors. The biggest thing is you're going to, there's 2 mobs at the start of the Horrific Vision that were very punishing the first week we saw it, and there were nerfs, so they're a lot easier to handle. But we're going to be doing a fairly large pull here at the start. We're going to be trying to grab 3 groups along with the 2 guards in front of Illyria's room, just to make sure we don't have to handle them at the end and we can just run right into Illyria. And we're going to be pulling everything on top of each other using the cathedral to line of sight them, making sure we get a kick on the fallen void speaker as we run by. They're going to cast Mind Flay. We just want to lock them out of their school for a couple seconds here so we can cut off line of sight. We're going to be committing our Stormkeeper to this pull and hoping to use just that ability to get the step down. So doing a Stormkeeper into an Earthquake, back into a Stormkeeper into an Earthquake is the best way to do this. You might have noticed that I got a refund on my Maelstrom. Instead of using Totem Mastery, I will be running Aftershock as a talent choice. So, and these Riftwalkers are the things that I was talking about that got nerfed. They used to do their abilities like very, very frequently, and if you didn't have a way to dispel their buff or quickly move out of their like strikes, you would just get stun locked for a very long time and take a bunch of damage that was unnecessary. So this next pull, it's going to be 2 groups. We're going to commit Beam to this to get everything down. Unfortunately, I got feared right out of that Beam at the very end, so the Heart Piercer missed that last tick, and my Infinite Stars finishes off. So that's one thing I do want to talk about is the corruption level I'm running this week compared to last. I'm sitting around 38 corruption or so. I am running 1 tier 3 Infinite Stars, and that's it. I would prefer things like Echoing Void, but as I'm making this video, Blizzard has posted that they're going to be nerfing Echoing Void, though it hasn't hit live servers. They said they're going to be hot fixing it in. So when it comes to corruption, I don't really recommend running any. A lot of times it can screw you over, even just the slow effect from the tendril. So I'd recommend not running any, but I do run this because I'm fairly comfortable with the Stormwind route. So we're going to be heading to the Dwarven District, and we're going to be doing our best to do as an effective as a pull as possible, because we want to commit Earth Elemental to this next grouping of mobs. So we're going to be running around grabbing like 4 or 5 trash pulls here on top of the Elite, which is the Forge Guard Hurl. So we're going to pull everything into this little blacksmithing area, drop Earth Elemental, and we're going to be committing Stormkeeper as well to make sure that we're going to get our Elite Extermination to proc when the Forge Guard goes down. So there are these 2 Fallen Heart Piercers off to the side. Now I recommend pulling everything on top of those guys because they're a lot more difficult to move because they're just going to spam just ranged effects. But unfortunately I didn't do that here. But if I can go back and change something, this is definitely something I'll be doing, is trying to maximize either using line of sight or getting everything on top. So with Earth Elemental being extremely tanky, we're able to make it through this pull fairly easily. And then we're going to be chaining it to finish off the rest of the zone. So essentially the zone you can clear in 1 or 2 pulls, which is going to be the goal. Then we're going to be using our Essence of the Focusing Iris here to finish it all off. And there's that 1 Heart Piercer that I pulled at the very start that's still alive, hiding behind this big old barrel. We're going to finish it off, and then we got to plant 8 bombs. We've already planted 1 of them, but we have to plant the rest. So they're scattered around. You can see on your mini map where they're located, so keep an eye out for that. There's pretty much 1 in front of every building, and it's another way to think about it. And I could have definitely been more effective about this. Like, I didn't plant them in the best order. I was fairly slow. I never mounted up. So I could have gotten out of the zone much quicker. But notice that we haven't used an orb yet. We still have about 50% of our sanity bar left. On the left-hand side of my screen, I do have this nice little weak aura. I want to say it. So I think I just found this on wago.io. I'll have the link in the description. But I see a lot of people run this, and it's super nice because it gives you an estimate of how much time you have remaining. It shows your charges, and it shows you a % plus number count. So it's kind of nice to have I recommend getting one, especially if you're just using kind of like a base UI like I did. It was very annoying to have to constantly go over my sanity bar to see how much sanity I have and not show a percentage either. So we got all the bombs planted, we detonate them, and then we're going to be spawning Therum, who is the last mini boss of here. I still haven't used an orb yet, but I am going to get another 200 sanity from defeating him, and I'm going to just commit Stormkeeper here to blow him up, but nothing else. We still have Fire Elemental on which is still up, but we're going to be using it a little bit later. And then Essence of the Focusing Arrows is also coming up now, but there's no reason to use it when he's at 10% health. So he goes down 200 sanity. I accidentally leaped the opposite way of what I wanted to go. So our next stop is actually going to be Old Town, which is the kind of southernmost corner for those of you who aren't used to being in the Alliance City. This one Mind Tendril will have to die. We don't want to be combat locked with it, so I do spend a little bit of time here killing. But when you're out within these, when you're out near the water, you're actually being considered that you are in the tainted zone. So your sanity is going to drain fairly slowly out here, so you don't have to worry about it. Now I'm going to go in this entrance instead, and for some reason there are normally 2 stealth guys who will stun you and slow you and make your cast take super long. They didn't spawn there, so I was able to just run right to the next elite, which is the Arms Master. And we're going to try to commit Stormkeeper to blow her up as soon as possible, because I want that 200 sanity back. But she also has a few sanity draining effects, so you just want to be careful not to really stand too close to her. As a range, it's really easy. This week, though, the madness is Leaden Foot, which as we move, we're going to be slowly, not slowly, we're going to be quickly slowed, which means you want to minimize your movement. And again, as a caster, that's not normally a bad thing, but it will present itself as an issue later in the mage quarter, but I will talk about that when we get there. So Leaden Foot is a little annoying, but not too bad. Also, being a shaman Ghost Wolf, we can't be slowed below 100% speed, so realistically all you have to do is be in Ghost Wolf and you can go wherever you want. The only issue with being in Ghost Wolf is that you're normally not doing damage. Do be careful of these light hunters. They are stealthed, so you just have to don't run ahead to try to orb. If you're gonna orb in this zone, make sure you're orbing before, pull things back into the orb, and just you got to be really aware of where these stealth guys are located. So they're normally near these alleys, I would describe it. So another one just popped up there out of nowhere as well, and we're going to try to target these informants. These informants are similar to the mobs in Orgrimmar that will stun you, the Decimators or whatever their names are. So you just want to be careful, or the Dominators. The Dominators are the guys in Orgrimmar that you want to be careful of. So they'll channel a 5-second stun, and being stunned for 5 seconds is just not a good thing. You're taking a lot of damage. You're not doing damage. So just all around not a good position to be in. So you want to make sure these informants are dying. So there's Touch of the Abyss. I'm going to go for a kick, but it died just in time. So we will now be doing the elite mob here. So we do want to keep in mind, because we have elite extermination, we will be gaining 200 sanity back, so it's not very effective to orb right before you do an elite. You want to make sure you're getting it down in time, and again, rotating those cooldowns and committing those certain cooldowns to certain pulls. On this one, I committed Stormkeeper and Fire Elemental, and chaining Fire Elemental into this next pull, because this Executioner is actually extremely annoying with the grips that it does, and it instantly gives us high stacks of Leaden Foot, which means we can't really kite as much. Now this pull gets a little dicey. You're going to want to make sure you're stocked up on plenty of health pots. Also, I am a Draenei, so I have Gift of the Naru, and Astral Shift is also a pretty potent damage reduction. It's 40% on a minute and a half cooldown, so every few pulls you can typically use Astral Shift, and there is a specific Azerite trait that gives you health back when you do Astral Shift. So now we're going on to Shah. We're sitting at about 70% sanity, so we're looking pretty good. Shah is fairly annoying, especially for casters. So these Eyes of Chaos will drain your sanity if you're staring in the direction of it. So you want to always make sure you're putting them behind your character. So kind of rotating yourself properly. You're going to see I have kind of odd movement there. I was just zapped and I lost a little bit of sanity. I'm charging a beam and I'm trying to move around, but with Leaden Foot, it's very difficult to move. I don't want to go into Ghost Wolf. And eye will spawn at each threshold of health. So it'll start at so he'll start with one eye, and then at 60% health, he'll spawn a second eye, and then at 30% health, he'll spawn a third eye. So you'll never have to deal with more than 3 eyes. This is a lot easier to solo than it is to do in group, because in group content, it's very hard to position yourselves, especially with Leaden Foot, and if you don't have a way to drop your stacks or ignore your stacks. Shamans having the ability to go into Ghost Wolf, like I said before, is kind of a luxury. Being able to just kind of Ghost Wolf and run at normal speed without even having to worry about the effects is super nice. The only downside is you lose a little bit of damage, but we're going to be relying heavily on our Lava Shock procs to get those instant lava bursts, which is our main source of damage. So these guys did spawn. They're supposed to spawn as soon as you open the door, but I think sometimes they bug out if you're able to open the door, mount up, and run into the zone very fast. They don't, like, you don't get in combat with them. So, but when you're leaving, you do have to be careful of that. Now, there is another option that you basically take the portal back to Cathedral District and then leave again, but that just means you have to still pull an extra trash mob. So it's, do you prefer being slowed, or do you prefer like having to deal with a few more extra mobs that'll just do just general damage? So it's kind of up to you what you want to do. That tree gave me a hard time. They're probably the hardest part about this horrific vision is getting stuck on that tree back there. So we're going to be running into this next zone. I have Earth Lily that just came back up, so I'm going to be committing that to a larger pull here on the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor is probably the most annoying elite mob in here. He just constantly will drain your sanity every time he channels that cast. I would say you want to kick as often as possible. On a Shaman, you can kick every 12 seconds, but unfortunately, that kick isn't up enough for you to be able to kick every cast. So kick on basically on cooldown. As soon as you see Agonizing Torment, kick it so you don't lose that extra sanity. And then also these appendages you have to be extremely careful of. If you don't have cooldowns or any way to burst them down fairly quickly, you'll probably suffer just being combat locked for a long time. Because I still have Earth Ellie up, I do want to do another pull, a fairly large pull, because I still, like, he's still going to take a lot of damage from me. So I'm gonna pull these two groups together, at least do my best to, and commit Stormkeeper to this pull, which will give me a lot of Maelstrom generation, a lot of damage, and some Earthquakes, which will not only interrupt the mobs, but also do very, very good damage. Now, just a little side note, just for general Shaman rotation, Earthquake will be beneficial on more than 3 or more targets. So if there's 3 or more targets, I definitely recommend using Earthquake. And it's a pseudo interrupt. It has a chance to knock down your enemy, which will interrupt casts and stun them basically. Like they'll take damage, but they also won't be stunned. And now this guy's a little annoying, so I'm going to use Fire Elemental here. So even if I'm silenced, my Fire Elemental will still be doing casts and still hitting for a fairly large amount. Typically, your Fire Elemental should be hitting for about 20-ish K, depending on crits or not. And then I'm going to be using a big fat Earthshock to get him down quickly. So we got 200 sanity from that. I still have Fire Elemental up, so I want to continue having him casting. So I'm going to grab these 2 mobs and get them down, or 2 packs and get them down. Now, one thing that I didn't do too effectively in this zone is opening up these little jail cell cages. There is a better way to do it. I unfortunately did a very poor job of it. So making sure you're never backtracking. I backtrack a lot after I kind of clear out this zone. I can also clear it out a lot more effectively. You can do pretty much this entire zone minus like the Inquisitor or the 2 elite mobs, and you can pull everything and like line of sight it around a corner to blow it all up in like one go. So if you're smart about it, you can commit just 1 beam and maybe an Earth Elemental to just 1 giant pull to clear out the entire zone. But then again, you don't want to backtrack. So I do Orb here because I was fairly low, and I'm going to pull this last pack with the appendage into this Orb. As soon as it spawns, I'm going to be getting a Flame Shock on it to knock it down with some big fat 53k lava bursts. So that goes down, Orb is done. All we have to do is finish off opening these cages and going on to the Mage Quarter, which is our last zone we need to do. Now keep in mind, if you feel comfortable and you should have the talent, but there's all these chests. You'll see me looting them every once in a while. They give a fair amount of mementos, I've seen anywhere between like 30 and 70 mementos from a single chest. So grabbing these will help you progress your tree a little bit further, or start working towards those sick transmogs, the capes and the extra gem slots. So I recommend grabbing these if you have time, but don't feel like you have to. If you happen to be next to it, pick it up, but don't go out of your way to search for them. So on to this next zone. Now you will see me skip around this here. I don't like messing with the tentacle. The little river canal is super narrow at the end, so I just run to the end and jump over it. And then I'm going to be going to the next zone. Now you have to be super careful here because these corruption tumors will put you in combat. And the madness in this zone, like we saw before, is leaden foot. So if we're in combat and we start moving, we're going to be slowed by a tremendous amount, I think up to like 90% slowed. So we just want to be extremely careful. So I'm going to pull this burrowing appendage out. Again, very annoying to deal with. They interrupt your casts. You have to like retarget them. So if you're trying to tab target, it's a little obnoxious. And then these crawling corruptions will constantly be padding around the room and keeping you in combat. So you want to clear them as often as possible. The last time I did Horrific Vision in Stormwind, like 2 weeks ago before this run, I failed this zone simply because the Crawling Corruptions kept me in combat so long I couldn't get an orb down, and I ended up failing it. So making sure those are a priority and trying to group them up to burst them down with things like Stormkeeper or Essence of the Focusing Iris. So these Greater Void Elementals are the things you pretty much want to kick. They're going to do this Void Buffet, and Void Buffet will make you take increased shadow damage from like all sources. And almost everything in here does some type of shadow damage. So if you want to keep your damage intake low, I highly recommend either interrupting them or using cooldowns to knock them out. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to skip this padding elite. The Boundless Corruption, it's a giant guy. It requires a lot of movement. It requires more than likely a cooldown that I don't really want to commit here. So I'm gonna Essence of the Focusing Iris this, get the Void Elemental fairly low, start working on this Void Speaker a little bit as that Elemental dies out to dots, and then I'm gonna you can kick mindfully if you want. It's not a whole lot of damage. It's really important to kick it if you have a lot of stacks of Void Buffet. So right here, I was thinking about pulling the Boundless Corruption to get a little bit extra sanity, but I didn't think it was worth it, and I want to try something a little later. I'm going to be using him to restore sanity right before I finish off this zone, which will be the Magister Rumburak. So we're staying in the orb, we're mounting up, and we're running up to the next mini boss that we can get to. Now, I did get in combat there, so I started getting the leaden foot debuff, and when you're mounted, it just makes you pretty much feel like you're frozen. So I just decided to dismount and go into Ghost Wolf to feel like it would do more. Again, burrowing appendages take up a fair amount of time. Make sure you can throw a cooldown or some big hits into it before they start burrowing. So at the very top of the hill here, you'll see Zardeth of the Black Claw. I commit Stormkeeper to this pull, and Flame Shock, and Fire Elemental. So I'm going to be doing a lot of damage right off the bat here. I'm pumping out, 40k, which actually doesn't seem like a whole lot. So I climb up to 50k. This guy will go down. I still have Fire Elemental, so I'm going to be using him to get down a lot of these, the rest of these servants, and hopefully another portal as well, just with Fire Elemental. So those guys go down. I'm running out of my corruption, and I'm moving to, I think, the 4th portal now. So that's the goal of this objective, is we have to close these void portals. They're located, you can obviously see from the video where they're located in the route that I took. There are a few routes and there are a few buildings you can weave through. Obviously, if you're a Horde player, you're probably not familiar with the pathing in the Mage District because you often don't hang out in Stormwind. But you can run through this house back to the courtyard, which this is when I will be using the Boundless Elemental to restore some sanity, committing Essence of the Focusing Iris here to get some on-demand damage when I don't have to spend time casting. These debuffs on the floor will drain sanity if you get hit by them. I think it's 15 if I'm not mistaken. So we want to be using as many as instant casts as possible. So we're really hoping for some decent procs, which I didn't really get much of. But again, 700,000 health isn't that much, especially when I think I'm sitting around 455 item level or 458, something like that. So this is the last Portal Master. We are going to absolutely just blow him up. I didn't really use any cooldowns there. I just happened to have an Earthshock proc. So I'm gonna now have to climb this Mage Tower. There is this last Crawling Corruption, which did get me in combat, and as soon as I dismount, Infinite Stars procs and one-shots it, which I was pretty frustrated about. But we're heading up to Magister Rumburak with about 50% sanity. My timer says I have about a minute. This is the most annoying boss possible, especially with Leaden Foot. Being a shaman is extremely beneficial. Like I've said before, Ghost Wolf can't slow us below 100% speed, so I can't even imagine what other classes have to do on this fight. This guy actually took a little bit of work to get down, so I'm going to do kind of a standard opener, Lava Burst and a Flame Shock and a Fire Elemental, and then as soon as he hits 75% health, he's going to port across the room. Fire Elemental does not want to do anything here. You have to be in melee range for your Fire Elemental to do any damage. Also, you also have to be in melee range. You want to be focusing on kicking Polymorph if you ever cast it. If not, you can kick the Entropic Missiles, which will drain sanity over time, similar like we saw on the Inquisitor from the Trade District. So again, trying to get into melee range, getting a few cast off on him. He went to cast Polymorph, but then he ports away again, and I'm just running back and forth. So not being affected as badly by Leaden Foot is super nice here, but unfortunately, it just ends up taking a crap load of sanity from me. I kick the missiles, I finish him off with an Earthshock, I get 200 sanity back from Elite Extermination, and now we are done with all 4 zones, heading back to Tainted in the Cathedral District to finish off Illyria. Now, I was a little concerned at this point that I wouldn't make it. I do still have a Cheat Death, keep that in mind, and also when Cheat Death procs, you do not lose any of your buffs. So don't feel like you have to hold hero if you're going to hero here. But I'm going to commit hero to this pretty much right on pull. I unfortunately don't have Fire Elemental, but I do have Stormkeeper and Essence of the Focusing Arrow, so I'm going to Stormkeeper pre-pull. I'm going to pre-pot using Unbridled Fury, and then I'm going to try to open with a Lava Burst into Flame Shock Wombo combo. And we are going to spawn Earth Elemental, so maybe it'll attack something else, but Earth Elemental also will do a little bit of damage. Darkened Sky, you just want to move out of the Dark Swirls. Bombs are going to spawn as well. You're just going to not send them. You can also kick them away from you, but I don't think it's worth, like, the commitment. Like, it wasn't worth it for me to have to, like, you know, move my mouse. Now, with the Chains of Suffering, you can move behind one of these pillars and tuck yourself in, and it won't pull you, so you don't have to run against it. Void Eruption, you're going to want to move behind the pillars in line of sight so you don't lose that extra sanity. It's extremely important to play well here and not get hit by anything, especially when your sanity is this low. I almost killed her without proccing Cheat Death. I'm going to move into my Promised Power to get a little extra damage out, but unfortunately, my Cheat Death procs there, but that's okay. I'm going to Earth Shock. Infinite Sword is going to proc Lava Burst for the kill. 200 sanity back, which doesn't matter. And that's going to be a full clear of the Horrific Vision. That was the run. Fairly simple. It's all about planning around your cooldowns and making use of different pulls and different cooldowns and knowing how much damage each one will put out. So like either chaining Earth Elemental with some big damage like Essence of the Focusing Arrows, or just using Stormkeeper and Earthquakes and relying on more of your toolkit than an Essence is a very effective way to clear the zone. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this and I hope it helps. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.